The first time Kale Virex recorded a human refusing to surrender, he marked it as an error in judgment, a predictable flaw in a species still bound by primitive emotional constructs rather than optimized survival logic. The report was clean, efficient, and ultimately wrong, though he would not realize that until much later. At the time, the situation appeared straightforward. A minor colony world on the outer edge of contested space. No significant military infrastructure, no strategic value beyond its position along a secondary supply route. Already isolated, already surrounded, already lost. Coalition doctrine, refined over centuries and enforced by the strategic command of the outer systems, dictated a simple outcome. Present overwhelming force, issue a surrender directive, accept compliance, minimize resource expenditure. In 13.7% of recorded cases, this sequence resolved without resistance. Kale stood in the observation chamber aboard his assigned vessel, watching the surface of the human colony through a stabilized orbital feed. His posture still, precise. His attention divided between the live visual and the scrolling data metrics that translated the scene into something measurable, something predictable. Below him, the settlement shows signs of arterial escapement. Transport vessels rifting from designated zones, infrastructure shutting down in controlled sequences, power grids rerouting energy away from civilian sectors, everything aligned with expected surrender behavior. Compliance curve with an acceptable range, he noted, his voice low, even, recording the observation into the system without hesitation. Behind him, a junior tactical analysted, Reese Soln, shifted slightly, is moving between the SKUation Metatrix and as Maller feed forecast on the Corny's Norsum perimeter. Observer, Reese said. There are still armed units in Sector N3. They haven't withdrawn. Kale did not turn immediately. Residual defense elements, he replied. They will disengage once civilian evacuation reaches threshold.
They've held position for 3 cycles,
Reth said, a faint edge in his voice that suggested uncertainty rather than contradiction. That was enough to draw Kale's attention. He expanded the northern sector feed, isolating the area in question. What he saw did not align with standard retreat behavior. The human units, small, disorganized by coalition standards, lacking uniform formation, had established a defensive line along a narrow ridge overlooking a civilian transport corridor, their positioning inefficient from a purely tactical perspective, exposed on multiple angles, limited cover, minimal fallback routes. They're holding the wrong ground, Kale said, more to himself than to Reth. Should we crashify it as delay? Lee asked. Kale considered the question. Not because it was complex, but because the data did not immediately support a clean answer. Delay tactics required a defined objective, time to reinforce, time to regroup, time to reposition, and there was no indication that such an objective existed here. The colony was already lost. Reinforcements were not coming. Regrouping would not change the outcome. No, he said finally. Not delay. Inefficiency. He marked the units accordingly, tagging them as non-strategic resistance, a category reserved for actions that deviated from optimal behavior without impacting overall outcome. The system accepted the classification. The report updated. The war, as far as the archive would later record, continued exactly as expected. Then the first transport ship failed to launch. It was a small craft, civilian grade, overloaded beyond standard capacity, its ascent trajectory unstable from the moment it left the ground. Kale's display flagged it immediately, highlighting the deviation in RAND, calculating projected failure within seconds. Transport failure detected, he noted, already preparing to log it as collateral loss. On the Norse Renridge, the human defensive units shifted, not in formation, not in any pattern Kale recognized, but with sudden coordinated urgency, abandoning their positions, moving downslope toward the transport corridor, exposing themselves fully to Coalition line of sight.
Reth's voice sharpened. They're breaking formation.
They had no formation to begin with, Kale replied, though his focus had narrowed, tracking the movement with increasing precision. Coalition targeting systems responded instantly, locking onto the advancing figures, calculating trajectories, preparing to eliminate the threat before it could interfere with operational objectives. Kale watched the targeting markers settle, the firing solutions align, the moment stretching just enough for him to register what the humans were actually doing. They weren't advancing toward Coalition forces. They were moving toward the failing transport.
Obzaba? Vez prompted.
Kale did not answer. On the surface, two of the human units reached the transport just as its engines began to destabilize. One of them climbing onto the exterior hull without hesitation, manually adjusting something near the rear thrusters, while the other coordinated movement around the boarding ramp, directing civilians, slow, disorganized, frightened, into position. There was no defensive posture, no attempt to engage the incoming threat, only focus on the transport itself. Coalition weapons fired. The first strike hit the ground just behind the group, close enough to disrupt, not precise enough to eliminate. Dust and debris scattered, civilians faltered, and for a moment, the entire sequence seemed on the verge of collapse. It didn't. The human on the hull secured whatever adjustment he had been making, struck the surface twice with his hand, an action Kale could not immediately interpret, then dropped back down, pulling another individual up toward the ramp as the engine stabilized just enough to hold thrust.
They're prioritizing evacuation over survival, Reth said, his tone no longer uncertain, but confused.
Kale's response came slower than it should have. That is incorrect prioritization. Another strike followed, closer this time, forcing the group to scatter momentarily before reforming around the transport. One human fell. Kale's display marked the loss instantly. But the others did not pause, did not redirect, did not adjust their behavior to account for the casualty. The transport's engines surged, uneven but functional, and the craft began to lift, slowly, dangerously,
but drifting noser west. On the Ritz above all, the band-under defensive line remained empty. They gave up the high ground,
Reth said quietly. Yes, Kerudi Praido. For that? Kale did not answer. He watched as the transport cleared the immediate engagement zone, its trajectory unstable but viable, carrying with it more mass than it should have been able to support, more lives than its design allowed. The human units below did not follow. They did not retreat. They did not reposition. They remained where they were, exposed, visible. And now, without any apparent objective, Coalition targeting recalibrated. This time, the strikes were precise. The first eliminated two of the remaining figures instantly. The second forced the rest to the ground, their movement slowing, fragmenting, losing coherence. And still, Kale noted this with a precision that bordered on disbelief. None of them attempted to withdraw.
They know it's over, Reth said.
Yes, Kerudi Praido. Then why are they still there? The question lingered, unanswered, as the final strikes landed, the engagement concluding exactly as the system predicted it would. The remaining human units neutralized, the sector secured, the operation marked as successful with minimal deviation from expected parameters. Kale completed the report, his movements automatic now, his voice returning to its usual measured cadence. Engagement resolved. Civilian evacuation partially successful. Residual resistance eliminated. Outcome within acceptable range. He paused before finalizing the entry, his gaze shifting back to the transport, now disappearing beyond the edge of the feed, its unstable trajectory carrying it into the uncertainty of open space. Addendum, he said after a moment. Reth looked at him. Observer?
Carol did not look away from the display. Human units in Sector N3 about daunt tactically advantages as position to skeern and strategic asset. Behavior result an increased survivable probability for civilian elements at the cost of total unit loss.
That's not standard classification, Led said.
No,
Kale agreed.
he hesitated just for a fraction of a second, a delay so small it would not have been recorded in any system log, but present nonetheless.
Mark it, he said quietly, as anomalous. The system accepted the entry without question. But as Kale Virex watched the fading signal of the transport, carrying lives that should not have been saved by any rational measure, he found himself unable to assign the anomaly to inefficiency.
Because for the first time since to the word bigging, the outcome did not align with the logic that defined it.
And that misalignment, however small, did not feel like an error.
It felt like the beginning of something he did not yet understand.
The second anomaly did not occur on a battlefield of consequence, nor did it involve a target of measurable value. It emerged instead from a narrow strip of urban debris on a colony world already classified as strategically irrelevant, a place where the war should have moved past without resistance.
And yet, Carol V. Rex found himself redirected there by a craster of minor irregularity that refused to resolve into statistical noise. The report that triggered his attention was almost dismissible. A patter unit from the Strategic Command of the Outer Systemas incontinented intermittent resistance while securing a civilian zone, no casualties, no delay beyond acceptable sless.
But appended to the ROG, again improperly, was a manual note from a ground officer.
Targets disengaged to a private non-combatants.
Kale replayed the engagement from the beginning, compressing the timeline, then slowing it again at the exact points where the irregularities appeared. The human units moved through the fractured streets with no visible cohesion by coalition standards, no uniform spacing, no synchronized advance, no centralized command structure detectable through signal analysis. And yet their movement carried a different kind of alignment, one that did not originate from system coordination, but from moment-to-moment adjustment. "They're not holding ground," Kale said, his tone quieter than usual, more focused.
"They're not retreating either,"
Rethsolen replied, leaning slightly closer to the display, his earlier confidence replaced by a careful attention that mirrored Kale's.
The first instance of Carol at the time stump 2時11分34秒. A human unit, single individual, right re-armored, weapon de shuji minimal, broke from a forward position. After brief contact with coalition scouts, not in response to threat escalation, but toward a collapsed structure at the edge of the engagement zone. Coalition targeting systems tracked the movement, classified it as withdrawal, and depolarized it in fifter of lamining active threats.
"He's leaving the fight,"
Reth said.
"No," Kale replied, already isolating the secondary feed. "He's moving towards something." The structure had partially collapsed inward, its upper levels reduced to unstable debris, thermal readings faint but present beneath the surface. The human reached it without hesitation, dropping his weapon to free both hands, beginning manual excavation with inefficient, imprecise movements that wasted time by any measurable standard.
"He's unarmed," resonated.
"Temporarily," Kale said, though the word felt uncertain even as he used it. Coalition units advanced past the position, ignoring the individual entirely, his actions categorized as non-threatening, irrelevant to operational objectives. The main engagement shifted further down the street, leaving the human outside the active combat zone.
At 2時12分8秒, the human posted, head tilting slightly as if listening, then zoomed a digging with increased urgency. Pringing aside, fragments of debris large enough to require full-body effort. His movements lacked efficiency, but not determination. Each action driven by something that did not register in any tactical metric.
"What is he doing?"
Reth asked, his voice lower now, less analytical. Kale did not answer. At 02:12:47, a second human appeared, emerging from an adjacent alley, weapon raised, scanning briefly before noticing the first individual. There was no verbal exchange detectable in the audio feed, no signal transmission. And yet the second human moved immediately to assist, mirroring the same inefficient excavation process without hesitation.
"They're compounding the error," Reth said.
"Or reinforcing the objective," Kale replied.
The debris shifted. A small void opened. Thermal readings spiked. 2, possibly 3 smaller signatures beneath the collapsed structure.
"They're retrieving civilians," Reth said, the realization arriving with a note of disbelief.
Yes, Kirsedo.
During an active engagement.
Yes.
At 2時13分15秒, Croatian scouts lead and tread the sector. They are Pator pass into secking with the position. Targeting systems recalibrated, identifying the 2 humans as actives. Rets due to proximity, weapons reacquired, firing solutions prepared.
"They'll be eliminated," Reth said, returning briefly to familiar certainty. The first shot struck the edge of the structure, collapsing additional debris inward, forcing both humans to pull back momentarily. One of them, Kale could not distinguish which, raised a hand toward the opening, not as a defensive gesture, but as if signaling to those beneath to remain still.
"They're exposed," Reth said.
"Yes, Kiridi Praido. They can't complete the extraction in time."
"No,"
Kale said. The second shot followed, closer, forcing a full retreat from the immediate area. For a moment, it appeared the engagement would resolve in predictable fashion. The humans forced to disengage, the civilians lost, the anomaly contained within acceptable loss parameters. It did not. At 02:13:42, the first human re-entered the collapsed zone alone, moving faster now, disregarding incoming fire, reaching into the opening and pulling a smaller figure free. A child, based on size metrics, unarmored, unshielded, entirely non-combatant. He lifted the child without hesitation, turning away from the structure, passing the individual to the second human, who had repositioned just beyond direct line of sight.
"They split roles,"
Reth said, "without coordination."
"Kealad," or without visible coordination,
Reth corrected, though the distinction no longer sounded certain. The second human moved the child toward a rear corridor, partially shielded from coalition view, then returned to the collapsed structure, rejoining the first without pause.
"They're going back," Reth said, the confusion now evident in his voice.
"Yes, Kirsedo.
"For what though?"
The answer came seconds later. At 02:14:09, a second civilian was extracted, this time with greater difficulty, the debris shifting dangerously as the structure continued to destabilize. The first human's movements slowed, indicating possible injury, but he did not disengage, did not retreat, did not alter his objective. Coalition targeting adjusted again. The third shot was Prisa's. It struck between them, forcing both to the ground, the structure collapsing further, sealing part of the opening they had created. The civilians were out of immediate danger, but the humans remained within the collapse zone, partially trapped, partially exposed.
"They've achieved their objective," Reth said. "They should withdraw."
Kale watched the feed, his attention fixed not on the broader engagement, but on the small, confined space where the 2 humans now struggled against debris that continued to shift around them. "They're not done," he said quietly. At 02:14:31, one of the humans, injured, movement impaired, pushed the other toward the opening, forcing him out of the collapse zone before attempting to follow. The structure shifted again, sealing the gap just as the second individual cleared it. The first did not emerge. Silence filled the feed, broken only by the distant movement of coalition units advancing through the sector. The engagement already resolved, the area already classified as secure. Reth did not speak. Kale did not move. The surviving human remained at the edge of the collapse for several seconds, unmoving, then reached down, placing a hand against the debris where the other had disappeared, a gesture that carried no tactical meaning, no strategic value, and yet was performed with a precision that suggested intention.
"What is that?"
Reth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kale replayed the moment, slowing it, isolating the movement. searching for any functional explanation. "I don't know," he stuttered.
The human stood after a moment, retrieved his weapon, and moved away from the structure, not toward the front line, not toward retreat, but along a path that did not align with any immediate objective. The system categorized the action as disengagement. Kale did not correct it. He completed the report with the same measured precision as before, documenting the sequence, the extraction, the loss, the deviation from expected behavior. When he reached the classification field, his hand paused, not physically, but within the system. A delay so slight it barely registered.
"Mark it," Led said quietly, as if anticipating the hesitation.
Kale entered the designation.
Anomalous behavior colon repeated engagement interruption to prioritizing non-converter textraction, resulting in partorial objective successes and unit loss. Motivational factors unclear.
He finalized the report. But as the data archived, as the system absorbed the event into its growing collection of irregularities, Kale found his attention returning not to the moment of extraction, nor to the tactical inefficiency, but to the final gesture, the hand placed against the debris, the pause before departure. It served no purpose. It changed nothing. And yet, it had be doing as if it mattered.
For the second time sheets up the evening humans in war, Carol V. Rex encountered an action that could not be explained by survivor, efficiency, or victory.
And for the first time, he began to suspect that the explanation did not exist within those categories at all.
The Sard anomaly did not present. It's as an event, but as a petition, a patan, so small it would have been ignored if Carol Villix had not Divin rucking for things that did not belong. It appeared across 3 separate engagements, different locations, different human units, different tactical contexts, and yet the behavior was identical in one specific detail: the return. Each time, a human disengaged from a secured position, moved back into a zone oldly classified as cleared or lost, and even tried get not to fight, not to reclaim the ground, but to retrieve something left behind.
Kale isolated the first instance, timestamp 0108:12, a skirmish along a fractured transport corridor where coalition forces had already established control. The human unit had withdrawn under pressure, leaving behind equipment, debris, and at least one confirmed casualty. The engagement resolved within expected parameters. Standard behavior dictated continuation. Advance, secure,
ignore liduros. Instead, at a Jijikufun Sambyo, a single human rivers to direction.
"He's going back," Reth Solon said, his voice no longer questioning, but tracking, as if the anomaly itself had become something to anticipate rather than dismiss. Kale slowed the feed. The human moved quickly but not erratically, retracing his path through the corridor with a familiarity that suggested memory rather than navigation assistance. He passed through zones already marked as high risk, ignored optimal cover, and reached the location where the casualty had fallen.
"He's retrieving equipment," Lee suggested.
"No," Kale said. "He left the equipment." The data confirmed it. The human did not touch the weapon lying beside the body, did not attempt to salvage anything of measurable value. Instead, he knelt, gripping the fallen individual by the upper torso, attempting to pull him free from the collapsed debris that partially pinned him to the ground.
"He's too ready," Led said. "Thermal readings are 0.
"Yes. Kiriri Praido."
Then why?
Kale did not answer. The extraction was inefficient, slow, requiring repeated effort as the human adjusted his position, bracing his body against unstable fragments of the corridor wall. At Lingiji Jofin Si Shuyimiao, coalition scouts re-entered the area, their movement intersecting with the human's position, targeting systems recalibrating, identifying the returning individual as an active threat.
"He'll be engaged," Reth said.
"Yes, Gerseddo."
The first shot struck the corridor behind him, forcing a brief pause. But the human did not disengage. Instead, he shifted his grip, pulling harder, dragging the body free in increments, each movement costing time he did not have.
At 01 minutes, 10 pounds, 02 seconds, the body cleared the debris.
The human did not stand immediately. He adjusted the position, lifting the upper half, securing it across his shoulders in a way that suggested familiarity with the action. Then began to move, slower now, burdened, but deliberate.
He's carrying dead weight, Reth said.
Yes, Kirudi Puraido.
That reduces his survival probability significantly.
Yes.
The second shot followed, closer, forcing him to stagger but not fall.
He continued forward, step by step, exiting the corridor just as coalition units reached the threshold, their targeting momentarily obstructed by structural interference.
The human disappeared from the feed.
The engagement closed. Kale marked the sequence, then moved to the second instance without comment.
Timestamp 3時47分19秒 A defensive line Arari overrun Human units in full retreat Coalition force advancing information One human broke from the retreat path turning back toward a position where multiple arties had been decoded.
Again, Les said quietly. Yes, Kirudi Puraido.
This time the return was shorter, more direct. The human reached the position, dropped to one knee, and performed a rapid sequence of actions Kale could not immediately classify. Removing an object from one fallen individual, placing it against another, adjusting something near the neck, then pausing.
What is he doing? Reth asked. Kale enhanced the feed, isolating the object. It was small, metallic, non-functional in any tactical sense, marked with symbols that did not correspond to any known coalition or human military designation.
It has no strategic value, Reth said.
Yes, Kirudi Puraido.
The human remained there for new 4 seconds. Kelmi joined at precises, then stand, turned, and rejoined the retreating units without retreating any equipment, without engaging the enemy, without altering the outcome of the engagement in any measurable way.
Why stop? Reth asked. Kale replayed the moment again, focusing on the pause, the stillness, the absence of movement in a situation that demanded constant motion.
I don't know, East.
He moved to the third instance.
Timestamp 0時56分3秒 Night cycle Limited visibility A small urban cluster already evacuated. Core Lion units sweeping for remain in resistance. A single human signal remained active with inner part sharing tractor. Classified as loss layers due to isolation and lack of support.
He's alone, Les said. Yes. Kirudi Puraido. The human moved through the structure slowly, deliberately, not in search of cover or escape routes, but along a path that suggested familiarity with the interior layout. He entered a smaller room, paused, then knelt beside a stationary figure partially obscured by shadow.
Thermal readings confirmed it. No life signs.
He's not leaving, Reth said.
No, Kale replied.
The human remained there longer than any previous instance. Gote no nabyo. His posture unchanged, head rotated, 100 stang on the still form beside him. There was no visible action, no attempt to move the body, no retrieval of equipment, no communication signatures transmitted. Is he waiting? Reth asked.
For what? Kaeruri Puraido. The question lingered, unanswered.
At 0時56分11秒, coalition units breached the structure. Their presence for sinky immediate resolution. The human stand, turned and engaged. Not effectively, not with any expectation of success, but with a sudden, controlled intensity that contrasted sharply with the stillness that preceded it.
He changed behavior, Reth said. Yes, Kirudi Puraido.
Why?
Kale watched the sequence again, aligning the moment of stillness with the moment of engagement, searching for any variable that could explain the transition.
There was no external trigger, he said. Then what caused it?
Kale did not answer. The engagement ended quickly. The human was eliminated, the structure secured, the report filed.
Back in the observation chamber, silence set a beat to win 2-1, not empty, but filled with the accumulation of details that no longer fit within the framework they had been trained to apply.
They keep going back,
Reth said finally.
Yes, kaiduri puraido. For things that don't matter. Kale turned slightly, just enough to glance at the data one more time, at the repeated pattern of return, of retrieval, of pause.
They matter to them, he said.
Reth frowned. That's not a measurable factor.
No, Kale agreed. He began compiling the report, linking the 3 instances, categorizing the behavior not as isolated anomalies, but as a recurring pattern, something that demanded recognition even if it could not yet be explained. When he reached the classification field, he hesitated again, not because the system lacked options, but because none of them were sufficient.
Mock it, Lee said, his voice quite turnout. Lee saddened.
Kale entered the designation slowly.
Anomalous behavior, Karan repeated want to re-entry into hostile zones, to retribute non-strategic assets, including deceased individuals' actions, result in increased risk with no measurable tactical gain motivation. With actors remain and defined.
He finalized the report. But as the data archived, as the system absorbed the pattern into its expanding structure of understanding, Kale found his attention drawn not to the inefficiency, not to the risk, but to the consistency. The fact that across different locations, different units, different circumstances, the behavior remained the same. They always went back.
Not because it improved their chances of winning, not because it ensured survival, but because leaving something behind, someone behind, was to them unacceptable in a way that no system could quantify.
And for the first time, Karavirekas considered the possibility that what drove human behavior in war was not something that could be measured at all. The force anomaly force itself into visibility, not Sewell repetition, but Sewell scale. Because for the first time, the behavior Karavirekas had been isolating in fragments, returns, pauses, inefficient choices, expanded across an entire engagement, and still refused to align with any model the strategic command of the outer systems considered valid.
The location was a transit hub on the edge of a collapsing front, valuable only as a temporary evacuation node, already scheduled for abandonment within the cycle, its loss calculated, accepted, and integrated into the role their operational flow. From orbit, Karavirekas watched the movement patterns stabilize into something that should have been style colon. Humans funneling civilians toward outbound transports, defensive units forming loose perimeters, timing sequences indicating a controlled withdrawal. This will resolve normally, Reth Solan said, though his tone carried less certainty than it once had.
It should, Kale replied. The first deviation appears in the timing. At 4 Junihun Sambyo, escapement's throughput dropped to be projected efficiency, not because of system failure, not because of external interference, but because the human flow itself slowed. Civilians hesitated at the boarding ramps, clusters forming where movement should have remained continuous. Congestion, Reth said, marking it automatically.
No, Kale said, already isolating the cause. At the base of one transport ramp, a single human unit, unarmored, likely civilian, had stopped, turning back toward the crowd rather than advancing. Behind them, others began to compress, movement faltering as the delay propagated outward.
They're blocking the path, Reth said.
They're waiting,
Kale corrected.
For what? The answer emerged seconds later. At 4:12:17, a second figure broke through the crowd from the opposite direction, moving against the flow. Slower, injured, supported by another individual whose movement suggested strain rather than coordination. The first human at the ramp stepped aside immediately, creating space, signaling others to hold position, not through any visible command system,
but through gestures that spread faster than any structured order.
They're reorganizing manually, Reth said. They're prioritizing individuals, Kale replied. That reduces total evacuation efficiency. Yes. The injured individual reached the ramp at 4 hours, 12 minutes, 29 seconds, assisted onto the transport while others remained waiting. Their own boarding delayed without resistance, without escalation, without any sign of conflict over priority. They're accepting delay, Reth said. Yes, Kirudi Praido. Voluntarily. Kale did not respond. The delay propagated across the entire hub. Each ramp experienced similar interruptions, individuals stopping, turning, making space for others not yet present, holding positions that should have advanced. The evacuation curve flattened, throughput dropping further below optimal levels with each passing second. This will cost them capacity, Reth said. Some will not make it. Yes, Kersedo.
Corrosion force entrad outer pellimeter at 40 Jusampun Nibio. They advanced sprices, controlled, encountering minimal resistance from a human defensive units that did not attempt to hold ground beyond immediate necessity. The perimeter contracted, fallback positions abandoned in sequence, exactly as expected for a force managing retreat under pressure.
They're trading space for time, Reth said. Yes, Kerudi Praido. But they're wasting that time. Kale did not answer immediately. His attention fixed on the evacuation nodes where the delays continued, small individual interruptions accumulating into a measurable loss. At 4 hours, 13 minutes, 44 seconds, the first transport reached capacity and lifted. Its departure clean, but later than projected, leaving behind a larger residual population than the model had predicted at that stage. They're falling behind schedule, Reth said. Yes. Kirudi Praido. They need to accelerate or they'll lose. The sentence stopped.
At 4Ju Juhyonpung Ichibyo, a human defensive unit at the Eastern Pamitar received incoming fire. They a position compromised. Four-back route a road compromised by earlier Widrower. Standard response dictated immediate disengage to preserve remaining force.
They did not disengage.
They're holding, Reth said, his voice tightening.
They're delaying, Kale corrected. For what? Kale shifted the feed, aligning the perimeter engagement with the evacuation nodes, overlaying the timelines. For them, histo. The defensive unit maintained position for 47 seconds beyond optimal retreat threshold, absorbing incoming fire, losing cohesion, losing personnel, but not collapsing. Each second extended the window for the evacuation nodes, each delay allowing another cluster of civilians to reach the transports.
They know they won't make it, Reth said.
Yes, Kerudi Praido. Then why stay? Kale watched the feed. Not the broad engagement, but the small details. The way one human adjusted another's position under fire. The way a third repositioned to kabad a gap that had no strategic value beyond protecting a retreat pass. Already marked for loss, the way none of them brocation, even as the formation itself ceased to have tactical meaning.
Because reaving would reduce the time, he's done.
That's not enough to change the outcome. It changes it for someone, Kale replied. At 04:14:49, the defensive line collapsed.
The last transport had not yet lifted.
Coalition units advanced into the evacuation zone, their presence forcing immediate termination of remaining operations. Civilians scattered, some reaching the transport, others not. The outcome fragmenting into individual successes and failures rather than a single measurable result.
The transport lifted at 4 Jugofun Sambyo, overload, unstable, but airborne.
Below, the remaining human units were eliminated within seconds. Silence followed. Reth did not speak. Kale did not move. The system marked the engagement as a partial success for the humans. Civilian evacuation achieved above minimum threshold, while categorizing the defensive losses as excessive relative to strategic value. The numbers aligned, the outcome processed, the war continuing as if nothing had deviated beyond acceptable margins.
They lost more than they should have, Reth said finally.
Yes,
For a location that didn't matter. Kale turned slightly, his gaze returning to the evacuation logs, to the delays, to the individual interruptions that had reduced efficiency but increased something else the system did not track. It mattered to them, he said.
Reth hesitated. That's not a variable we can use.
No, Kale agreed. He began compiling the report, documenting the sequence, the delays, the defensive hold, the evacuation outcome. When he reached the classification field, the hesitation returned. Longer this time, not because the system lacked categories, but because the categories themselves were insufficient.
Mark it, Reth said, though his voice no longer carried expectation, only quiet acknowledgement.
Kale entered the designation.
Anomalous behavior, large-scale acceptance of reduce the operational efficiency to prioritize individual survival with an evacuation process. Defensive units maintain position beyond optimal thresholds to extend evacuation window, resulting in increased losses. Motivational structure remains non-strategic.
He finalized the report. But as the data archived, Kale Virex remained focused on the smallest detail within the largest anomaly. The moment at the ramp where one individual stopped, turned, and waited, causing others to wait, causing the entire system to slow, not because it was efficient, but because someone else had not yet arrived. It was inefficient. It was costly, and it was consistent.
For the first time, he of the Abud the humans choosing something as than victory.
And for the first time, he began to understand that whatever they were choosing it on purpose.
The 5 anomaly begins as a single decision that should have been invisible, buried inside all root and engagement log. But Kelvy Rex catched it because he had started searching not for outcomes, but for moments. Small, precise points where human behavior diverged from expectation in ways that could not be justified by strategy. The location was a fractured industrial zone, long abandoned.
Its infrastructure degraded to the point of irrelevance, yet still contested because it lay along a minor transit corridor the strategic command of the outer systems had not yet fully secured. The engagement itself was unremarkable. Coalition scouts advanced, human resistance minimal, scattered, delaying but not contesting control. Standard retreat pattern, Reth Salan noted, his tone steady. Though he no longer dismissed deviations as easily as before, Kale did not respond immediately. He was focused on a smaller feed, one that tracked a single human unit moving along the edge of the engagement zone, neither fully engaged nor fully withdrawn. His path inconsistent with both attack and retreat.
He's not following the line, Kale said.
Reth adjusted the overlay. No squad alignment, no signal coordination. He's acting independently.
That's not new, Kale replied.
Watch the timing.
At 0221:14, the human paused behind a collapsed support column, weapon lowered but not discarded, his breathing visible through subtle movement in his posture. Coalition units passed within engagement range, their sensors registering him, classifying him as a low-priority threat due to lack of active aggression.
He could engage, Reth said.
Yes.
Kirudi Praido.
He doesn't. No. The human waited. Not in fear, not in indecision. Kale noted the steadiness of his posture, the lack of erratic movement, but as if aligning himself with something not visible in the immediate environment.
At 2:21分32秒, another human signal appeared on the edge of the field. Weaker, unstable, moving, erratically through the debris field. The first human shifted immediately, leaving cover, moving toward the signal without hesitation.
He was waiting for that,
Reth said.
Yes.
Kirudi Praido.
The second human emerged into view seconds later, injured, movement uneven, one arm held close to the body in a way that indicated damage. He stumbled once, nearly falling, then regained balance just as the first reached him.
They're linking up,
Reth said.
They're stabilizing,
Kale corrected.
The first human did not speak.
No audible exchange registered, but his actions were immediate and precise, adjusting the second's posture, redistributing weight, guiding movement in a way that suggested familiarity, not instruction. Together, they began moving along a path that did not align with any known retreat corridor.
They're off route, Reth said.
Yes, Kerudi Puraido.
That reduces their survival probability.
Yes. Coalition scouts shifted direction, their patrol path intersecting with the new trajectory, targeting systems recalibrating, identifying both humans as active threats due to proximity. The window for disengagement narrowed.
They won't make it, Reth said. Kale did not answer. At 022203, the pair reached a narrow passage between two collapsed structures, a space too tight for standard formation movement, partially shielded from direct line of sight. The first human paused, turning back briefly, scanning the direction they had come from.
What is he checking?
Reth asked.
Kale enhanced the feed. There was nothing there. No additional units, no incoming threat beyond what they had already evaded.
He's confirming, Kierusetto.
Confirming what?
Kale did not answer.
The second human leaned against the wall, breathing irregular, his movement slowing further. The first adjusted his grip again, then, unexpectedly, removed something from his own gear. A small object Kale could not immediately classify, and pressed it into the second human's hand.
It has no tactical function, Reth said.
Yes, Kerudi Puraido.
Then why give it? The second human closed his hand around the object, his posture stabilizing slightly. Not physically, but in a way that altered his movement pattern, reducing hesitation, increasing consistency in his steps. Kale replayed the moment, isolating the change.
It affected him, he said quietly.
How? Let's ask though.
I don't know.
At 2時22分31秒, correlation units reached the outer edge of the passage. Their presents for single immediate resolution. The first human turned, positioning himself between the second and the approaching Srate, weapon raised, stance steady.
He's covering Desusetto. Yes, Kerudi Puraido.
But there is no escape route.
Yes. The second human hesitated, just for a moment,
then moved past the first, deeper into the passage, disappearing from the feed. The first remained, holding position, firing only when necessary, each shot measured, controlled, designed not to eliminate, but to delay.
He's sacrificing himself, Reth said.
Kale watched the timing, the spacing between shots, the way the human adjusted position with each advance of coalition units, maximizing obstruction while minimizing exposure.
He's buying time, Kierusetto, for one individual. Res replied.
Yes. That's not efficient. No, Kale agreed.
At 022304, the final shot landed.
The human fell. Coalition units advanced through the passage seconds later, clearing the space, securing the zone. The second human signal was no longer detectable, its trajectory lost beyond the limits of the feed.
Silence settled again.
Reth did not speak immediately. When he did, his voice was lower, less certain than it had been at the start of the engagement. He ensured the other one escaped.
Yes, Kerudi Puraido.
For no strategic gain. Kale did not respond right away. He was reviewing the object exchange again, the moment where something insignificant had been passed from one to the other, altering behavior in a way that could not be quantified.
It mattered, he said finally.
Reth hesitated. We keep saying that.
Yes.
But we still can't define it.
No, Kale said. He began compiling the report, documenting the sequence,
the independent action, the deliberate delay, the object transfer. When he reached the classification field, the hesitation returned. Not uncertainty now, but recognition that the pattern was no longer isolated.
Mark it. Let's said quietly.
Kale entered the designation.
Anomalous behavior along individual unit disengaged from optimal retreat past to stabilize in Jeria lie. Transferred non-strategic object resulting in observable behavioral change. Then maintained position to delay enemy advance. ensuring ally escape at cost of own survival. Motivational factors remain undefined.
He finalized the report. But as the data archived, Kale Virex focused not on the sacrifice, not on the inefficiency, but on the moment before it, the pause behind cover, the decision to wait, the alignment with a signal that no system had prioritized, the choice made before any calculation could justify it.
For the 5 times he of the herbs to humans choosing something that reduced their chances of survivor.
And for the first time, he understood that the choice was not made despite the cost. It was made because the cost did not matter in the way he had been taught to measure it.
The 6 Anumri did not emerge from the battlefield, but from the spacious B2 engagements, the wide intervals, the strategic. Command of the outer systems had always considered irrelevant to outcome calculations, and it was precisely there that Kale Virex began to see the pattern most clearly. Because without active combat, without immediate threat, human behavior should have normalized toward efficiency, toward recovery, toward preparation for the next engagement. It did not. The observation came from a forward staging zone recently secured, debris still settling, coalition units sweeping for residual resistance, while human survivors, scattered, fragmented, occupied the margins of the area without any apparent structure. No organized defense, Reth Solon noted, scanning the feed. No regrouping signals. They're not reforming units. They're not preparing for another engagement, Kale said.
Then what are they doing? Kale isolated a cluster near the remains of a partially collapsed structure. 4 human figures positioned in close proximity, none maintaining defensive posture, none scanning for threats in a way that aligned with standard doctrine. 1 knelt, 2 stood nearby, the 4th remained slightly apart, head lowered, motion minimal.
They're stationary, Reth said.
Yes. Kirudi Praido. That's inefficient. Yes. At 1:34:12, the kneeling human began a sequence of movements, slow, deliberate, repetitive, clearing debris from a specific point on the ground, not in search of anything functional, not with the urgency of extraction, but with a precision that suggested intention rather than necessity.
He's searching, Led said.
No, Kale replied. He knows where it is. The object was revealed moments later. A human body, already identified by thermal scans as non-viable. The kneeling individual paused, hands resting briefly against the surface of the debris as if confirming something beyond the data Kale could access, then resumed, clearing space around the body until it was fully visible.
They've already lost him, Reth said.
Yes. Kirudi Praido.
Then why continue?
Kale did not answer. At 1:34:47, the 2 standing humans moved closer, not to assist in extraction, but to position themselves on either side of the kneeling figure, their posture shifting, not defensive, not alert, but aligned, as if forming a perimeter that had no tactical purpose. The 4th remained apart, still, head lowered, unmoving.
They're grouping, Reth said.
Yes, Kirudi Praido. For what function? Kale watched the sequence unfold, noting the absence of urgency, the lack of any response to nearby coalition movement, the way the humans seemed to exist within a boundary that did not correspond to physical space. At 01:35:03, the kneeling human stopped moving.
All for the maimed to will?
No communication signals were detected. No external triggers appeared. The environment did not change.
They've paused, Reth said.
Yes, Kirudi Praido. For how long? Kale measured it. 8 seconds, he said.
That's an eternity in a combat zone, Reese replied.
Yes. At 1:35:11, the 4th human stepped forward, closing the distance, and performed a single action, placing a hand on the shoulder of the kneeling individual, holding it there for a moment before withdrawing. The gesture was brief, precise, and entirely without tactical meaning.
What was that? Reth asked.
Kale replayed the motion, isolating the contact, searching for any measurable effect. None registered in the system. I don't know, Istu.
At 1:35:16, the group began to move again, the kneeling individual rising, the others adjusting position, their formation dissolving back into the scattered pattern Kale had observed before. The body remained where it was, now uncovered, no longer obscured by debris.
They're leaving it,
Reth said.
Yes, Kerudipudaido. But earlier they retrieved them.
Yes.
Why not now?
Kale did not answer immediately. He was comparing the sequences, returns under fire, retrieval attempts, pauses, gestures, and now this. Exposure without extraction, presence without action.
At 01時35分28秒. A Kryushin unit approached the position, scanning, verifying the absence of Srate, then marking the area as secure. The human group did not react, did not retreat, did not engage, simply moved past the zone as if the interaction had concluded on terms that did not involve the coalition at all.
They ignored us,
Reth said.
Yes, Kerudipudaido.
That's not logical.
No,
Kale agreed.
he shifted to a secondary feed, tracking the same group as they moved further into the staging zone. Their behavior remained inconsistent with any known recovery protocol. No regrouping, no equipment redistribution, no attempt to reestablish command hierarchy. Only intermittent pauses, brief exchanges, small actions that carried no measurable impact on future engagements.
They're not reorganizing, Reth said.
No,
Kale replied.
then what is this?
Kale watched one of the humans adjust another's gear without instruction. The motion brief but precise. Another passed a small container between them, consumption minimal, distribution uneven. The one who had knelt earlier moved more slowly now, not due to injury, his movement metrics did not support that, but due to something Kale could not quantify.
They're maintaining something,
Kale said.
What?
Reth asked.
Kale did not answer. He returned to the initial sequence, the moment of stillness. The 8 seconds where no action occurred, no threat response triggered, no efficiency gained. He replayed the gesture, the hand on the shoulder, the contact, the pause.
It changed their behavior, he said quietly.
Reth looked at him. There's no data to support that.
No.
Kale agreed. But the pattern does. Silence settled again. Not empty, but filled with the accumulation of observations that no longer fit within the framework they had been trained to apply. Kale began compiling the report, documenting the sequence in detail, the absence of combat, the presence of structured inaction, the gestures, the pauses. When he reached the classification field, the hesitation returned, but this time it carried a different weight. Not uncertainty, but the recognition that the anomaly was no longer tied to survival decisions alone.
Mark it. Let's set quietly.
Kale entered the designation.
Anomalous behavior, koro non combatto human.
You is engaged in coordinate and activity around the seasoned individuals, including deliberate exposures, physical contact, gestures, and delayed movement without tactical justification. Behavior appears to maintain non-measurable internal state rather than influence external outcome.
He finalized the report.
But as the data archived, Carol Virex remains forecast on the small test details within the sequence. The moment where nothing happened, where for individuals stood still in a combat zone for 8 seconds. Not because they had to, not because it improved their chances of survival, but because something required them to stop.
For the 6th time, he of the Briggs that humans choosing an action that had no measurable effect on the war.
And for the first time, he understood that whatever they were maintaining,
it was not something the war could take from them. The 7th Centenary was not discovered in motion, but in memory.
And that distinction is settled. Carol V looks more than any pry of our engagement. Because for the first time, the pattern persisted even after the event had ended, embedded in the behavior of a single human who should have been irrelevant to the broader conflict. The setting was a temporary hold zone established by the strategic command of the outer systems, a controlled environment,
where captured survivors' word process, categorized, and transferred a place designed for predictivity. No anymore is expected, Rizal Land said, reviewing the intake data. Subjectids were armed, contained, non-resistant.
Kale did not respond immediately. He was focused on one individual within the group, flagged not for aggression, not for escape attempts, but for a minor irregularity in movement patterns. Small pauses at consistent intervals, deviations so slight they would normally be filtered out by the system.
He stops every 31 seconds, Kale said.
Reth adjusted the feed. That's within natural variation.
It's consistent,
Kale replied. The human, designation temporary, identity unverified, moved with the others through the intake corridor, posture controlled, compliance within expected parameters. Hit it not register, did not deviate from assigned pass, did not interact with core lion personnel beyond was required. At 0Z Junaiv Hun Sambyo, he posed.
No external trigger, no obstruction, no instruction.
He's hesitating, Reth said.
No,
Kale replied. He's stopping.
At 0Z Zhu Fun 34秒.
The human resumed movement, rejoining the flow without prompting, without delay beyond the measured interval. The patan repito at 0지 13분 5秒, zen again at 0지 13분 36秒. Each pause I detento in duration, 3 seconds. Each resumement immediate, as if governed by an internal sequence, that's zen external conditions.
Is it a malfunction?
Reth asked. Kale observed the posture, the controlled breathing, the absence of erratic motion. No, he said.
Then what is?
Kale did not answer. The human reached to the processing area at 0지 14분 12秒, where captured individuals were scanned, categorized, and assigned to containment sectors. Correlation personnel moved with efficiency, each action precise, each subject processed in under 10 seconds. The human complied fully, stepping into position, allowing the scan, responding to minimal instruction.
At 0지 14분 18秒,
He spoke again. This time, the pause occurred directly in front of a coalition officer, interrupting the processing flow.
Continue, the officer instructed.
The human did not move for the first 3 seconds. Then he stepped forward. That's non-compliance, Les said. Technically, Keiruri Puraido. But it doesn't change anything.
No,
Kale said. The human was assigned to a containment sector along with others from the same engagement zone, a space devoid of strategic value, monitored but not actively controlled beyond basic security. He moved to a position near the far wall, sat, and remained still.
At 0지 15분 1秒,
he stood. No instruction, no stimulus. He moved 3 steps forward, stopped, then returned to his original position and sat again.
He's repeating a pass, Rhi said.
Yes, Keiruri Puraido.
For what purpose?
Kale replayed the earlier movement logs, aligning the path with the pauses, the intervals, the timing. It matches something, he said quietly.
What?
Kale did not answer.
At 0지 16분 14秒. Another human in the containment area shifted closer, observing the movement pattern. No communication was detected, no signals exchanged, and yet the second individual adjusted position, aligned himself with the first pass, mirroring the 3-step movement with slight delay.
They're synchronizing, Reth said. Yes, Keiruri Puraido, without coordination. Yes. The baton expended. A surge individual adjusts a position, then a 4, each adapting a variation of the same movement. 3 steps, pose, return. They made not perfectly, but consistently enough to form a sequence that repeated across the small space.
This is inefficient,
Reth said.
It's not meant to be efficient,
Kale replied.
Then what is it meant to be?
Kale focused on the timing again, the intervals between pauses, the spacing of movement, the way the individuals adjusted not to avoid collision, but to maintain the pattern.
It's structured, he said.
But there's no outcome, Les replied.
No external outcome, Kale corrected. At 001703, the first human paused longer than before, 4 seconds instead of 3. His posture shifting slightly, head lowering, hands resting against his knees. The others continued the pattern, but their timing adjusted, extending their own pauses to match the deviation.
They're adapting, Reth said.
Yes. Keruri praido.
To what?
Kale watched the sequence, the way the pattern persisted despite the absence of any external requirement, the way it propagated across individuals who had not communicated, had not been instructed, had no reason by any measurable standard to behave this way.
To him, East. Silence followed. At 0017 minutes 22 seconds, the first human resumed the original timing. 3 seconds, and the others followed, the pattern stabilizing again, the sequence continuing as if nothing had changed.
Coalition personnel did not intervene. The behavior posed no threat, no disruption beyond minor inefficiency in spatial usage, no impact on processing or containment protocols. It was by all operational definitions irrelevant. Kale did not mark it as such. He began compiling the report, documenting the pauses, the movement, the synchronization, the absence of external triggers. When he reached the classification field, the hesitation returned, but this time it carried clarity rather than uncertainty.
Mark it, Let's said quietly.
Kale entered the designation. Anomalous behavior. Non-combat human subjects maintain synchronized movement pattern within containment environment, including timed pauses and spatial repetition without external coordination. Behavior propagates across individuals and adapts to internal variation, suggesting shared nonverbal structure. No measurable tactical function identified. He finalized the report, but as the data archived, Kale Virex remained focused on the smallest detail within the pattern. The first pause. The 3 seconds where a single individual stopped in a place where nothing required him to stop. And the way that pause had spread, replicated, maintained by others who had no instruction to follow it. It was not survival. It was not strategy. It was not even reaction. It was something carried forward, repeated, preserved even when everything else had been taken away.
For the 7th time, Ken observed of humans doing something that didn't help them win. And for the first time, he understood that whatever they were doing, they were refusing to let it disappear. The final anomaly was not recorded as a deviation, but as an answer. Though Kale Virex did not recognize it immediately because it did not disrupt the system, did not contradict expectations in any measurable way, it simply revealed something that had been present in every prior observation, hidden in plain sequence, waiting for the moment when enough fragments existed to form a whole. The setting was in Remarkable, a transfer corridor within a secured facility operated by the strategic commander of the Outer Systems, where captured humans were moved between containment sectors without resistance, without incident. Their behavior categorized as stable, predictable, controlled. No irregularities, Reth Salon said, reviewing the live feed, though his voice carried the quiet awareness that no irregularities no longer meant what it once had. Kale did not respond. His attention was fixed on a smaller detail within the flow. A human pair moving side by side, their pace aligned not with the corridor's movement rate, but with each other. One was older, movement slower, posture slightly uneven, while the other adjusted continuously, shortening steps, altering rhythm, maintaining proximity without physical contact.
They're matching speed, Reth said.
Yes. Kerudi Praido.
That reduces throughput.
Yes.
At 0時8分14秒 The older human faltado a brief loss of balance that did not trigger any system alert, did not disrupt the overall flow. The second human reacted immediately, not by signaling for assistance, not by stopping entirely, but by shifting position. placing himself slightly ahead and to the side, creating a subtle support vector that stabilized the other's movement without breaking pace.
He compensated, Reth said.
Yes, Keruri Praido. For no directive. Yes. They continued forward, the adjustment maintained, the deviation small enough to remain within acceptable parameters, large enough to matter only at the レベル変えるは始まった観察。0時8分31秒。ペアはジャンクションで通路は分かれ、処理ルートは個人の分類に基づいて分かれ、システムは彼らを異なる道に分けた。
They'll separate, Reth said.
Yes, Keruri Praido. The second human slowed. Not enough to trigger correction, not enough to disrupt flow, but enough to allow the older individual to reach the junction first. For a moment, both paused. Not fully, not in the measurable sense Kale had recorded before, but in a micro-delay that existed between movement and continuation.
They're hesitating, Reth said.
They're acknowledging, Kale replied, though the word formed before he fully understood it. The older human moved into his assigned corridor, disappearing from the shared path. The second remained for a fraction longer, then continued along his own route without resistance, without deviation. The separation complete.
That changes nothing, Reth said.
No, Kale replied. But they still...
He stopped. Kale had already shifted the feed, tracking both individuals separately now, observing the continuation of their movement beyond the point of separation.
The older human progressed more slowly, unassisted now, his movement less stable but still forward, still compliant.
At 0時8分52秒, he paused.
3 seconds.
Exactly. Kale's focus sharpened.
He stopped, Reth said.
Yes, Kaeruri Praido. In the same pattern, yes. But this time, the pause was not isolated.
At 0時8分53秒, in the adjacent corridor, the second human slowed. Just enough to hold his pace, just enough to introduce a delay that had no external course. At 0時8分55秒, he paused.
3 seconds. Not synchronized by signal, not coordinated by system, separated by structure, by classification, by physical space, and still aligned.
They can't see each other, Reth said, his voice quieter than it had ever been.
No, Kale replied. They're not communicating. No. Then how? Kale did not answer, because the answer was no longer in the data, no longer in the movement, no longer in anything that could be isolated or measured. It was in the pattern itself, the accumulation of every anomaly he had recorded, the returns, the pauses, the sacrifices, the inefficiencies, the gestures, the moments where nothing happened and everything changed.
At 0時8分55秒, Buzz humans leased a movement.
Independently. Together, the corridors carried them forward, deeper into separate containment sectors, their paths diverging permanently within the structure of the system that categorized them, controlled them, defined them.
And yet the pattern remained.
Kale did not mark the moment immediately. He replayed it once, then again, slowing the sequence until the pauses stretched, until the alignment became undeniable, until the absence of connection became the only possible explanation. They're maintaining it, he said quietly. Reth did not respond. They don't need proximity, Kale continued. They don't need communication. They don't need structure.
What is it? Reth asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer could not be expressed in the terms they had been using.
Kale watched the feed one final time. The two individuals now fully separated, their movements absorbed into different streams, their actions no longer linked by anything the system could detect. It's not a tactic, he said.
No,
Reth agreed.
it's not survival.
No. It's not even war. Silence followed. Not empty, but complete. Kale began the final report, not because the system required it, but because the act of recording had become the only way he could process what he had observed. When he reached the classification field, he did not hesitate this time.
Mark it, Led said quietly.
Kale entered the designation. Behavioral constant. Human subjects maintain non-measurable internal drivers across all conditions, including separation, containment, and loss. Actions previously classified as anomalies are consistent expressions of this constant. Motivational factor identified. Non-strategic, non-survival-based, persistent across individuals and contexts. He paused. Reth waited. Kale added one final line. Conclusion. Humans do not fight for victory. They fight for each other. He finalized the report. The system accepted it. The war continued. But for question Verlefs, the question hadn't, because he finally understood why humans fought. And understanding it did not make them predictable. It made them impossible to defeat.